What's up? I'm Vin, and today I want to go through this 2023 ASVAB Math Knowledge Practice section, and I'll leave a link to a copy of this practice section in the description below. So question 1, we have if x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0, what is the value of x? And we have a quadratic equation here, and I look at the x squared term, and if there's no number written in front, there's an invisible 1 there, and that tells us we could use the following factoring technique. We have to think of two numbers that have a sum that's equal to negative 6, and the two numbers also have to have a product that's equal to positive 9. So now think of the factors of 9. The numbers that multiply to 9, well, first we could come up with 1 times 9, and then we also have 3 times 3. But now remember, we have a sum that's equal to negative 6. So the only way we're going to get a negative sum and a positive product is if both of these numbers are negative. So I could have negative 1 times negative 9, and I could have negative 3 times negative 3. But think about the first pair. If I do negative 1 plus negative 9, that's going to give us a sum of negative 10, not negative 6. So this pair is out. But if I do negative 3 plus negative 3, that's going to give us negative 6. So that's the pair we want. And we're going to factor this now as x minus 3 times x minus 3, and we're setting this equal to 0. So now from this step here, let's just think about this. How could we have x minus 3 times x minus 3 equals 0? Well, that would be true if one of these factors was equal to 0. Now, I'm only going to set one of them equal to 0 because if I set x minus 3 equal to 0 twice, that's just doing too much extra work. So we only have to set it equal to 0 once. So if we add 3 to both sides, this is going to give us a solution of x equals, after negative 3 plus 3 cancels, we have x equals 0 plus 3, which is equal to 3. So choice B is our solution. But now before we move on, let's plug in x equals 3 to see that our answer is good. And just know, if you struggle with the algebra, you can just plug in all the answer choices and see which one gives you a true equation. So if I plug in x equals 3, I'm going to have x squared, and in place of x, I'm putting 3. So I have 3 squared minus 6 times x, and we're saying x is equal to 3, and then we have plus 9 is equal to 0. And now if we work this out, 3 times 3 is 9. Minus, we have 6 times 3 is 18, so we have minus 18, because remember, we're doing a negative times a positive, and that's a negative. And then we have plus 9 like this is equal to 0. And now if we do 9 minus 18, that's going to give us negative 9 plus 9 is equal to 0, and this is a true statement. So choice B is definitely correct. Question 2, we want to know which of the following is a prime number, and just know a prime number is divisible by just 1 and itself. So looking at these answer choices here, I see right away that 28 is even. So I just think of this here and I'm saying 2 times 14. So since I have factors other than 1 and 28, that means that 28 is not prime. 28 is a composite number, so I could cross this out. Now, it might be tempting to say 33 is prime, but 33 is divisible by 3 and 11. So we could say 33 equals 3 times 11, and notice that we have factors other than 1 and 33. So choice B is out. Now, C is in fact a prime number, so I'm just going to select this one because the only factors of 41 are 1 and 41. But if we look at choice D, notice this is an even number, but just know the only even prime number is 2. So we can have just one even number that's prime, but 48 is a big even number. So this one's not going to work. We could just think of this here as 2 times 24, and notice that these two factors are not equal to 1 and 48. So that's how I know choice D is composite. So choice C is definitely correct. Question 3, we have Jack buys a jacket for $60 and a pair of pants for $45. If he gets a 10% discount on the jacket, how much will he pay in total? Well, for this question, we have to note that the jacket is the only thing that Jack is getting a discount on. So the jacket is $60 and we're taking 10% off. So we have to think about 10%. 10% means 10 out of 100. And you could use this nice little trick here. You could cross off trailing zeros, and 10 over 100 reduces to 1 over 10. And now 1 over 10 is the same thing as 1/10. That's 0.1 as a decimal. So for this, whichever one you find easier is the one you're going to use. You could multiply 60 by 1 over 10, or you could multiply by 0.1. Once again, whichever one you think you could do better is the one you're going to do, because remember, you don't get to use a calculator for this test. So let's say I multiply by 1 over 10. So if I multiply by 1 over 10, just know when you multiply a whole number by a fraction, all you have to do is multiply the numerator with the whole number here. So I'm going to do 60 times 1 is 60. So I have in dollars here, I have 60, and then I'm dividing by 10. And now 60 divided by 10, I could just cross off these trailing zeros, is equal to 6 divided by 1, which is 6. So this tells us that Jack is going to get $6 off of the jacket. So we're going to take 60 and we're going to subtract 6, and this is going to work out to 54. So now the cost of the jacket is $54, and we're going to add this to the price of the pants, which is $45. And now we do 4 plus 5 is 9, 5 plus 4 is 9. So the total bill is going to be $99. Now, one more cool trick before we move on. What you could also say is when you're taking 10% off, you're also keeping 90% on. So once again, 10% discount means 90% of the price is still on. So what we could have done is taken $60 and multiplied it by 9 over 10 instead, because 90% is the same thing as 90 over 100, which is equal to 9 over 10. And now if we multiply this out, we're going to have in the numerator, we're going to have 60 times 9 over 10. And now for this, I could multiply 60 times 9 and then divide, or I could do 60 divided by 10 and cross off these zeros, and that's going to give me 6 times 9 up top, which is $54. And notice that gives me the price of the jacket right away without having to subtract it from the total. So this is just a nice little trick here that I personally like to use, but whichever one you find easier is the one you're going to use at the ASVAB. Question 4, we have the sum of 3 consecutive even numbers is 138, and we want to know what is the largest of these numbers. So for this question here, you just have to know what consecutive even numbers means. So for this, imagine we start at 2. The next even number would be 4, and then 6, and then 8, and then 10, and so on like this. So you have to notice the pattern here. The pattern is to get from one even number to the next, we're jumping by 2. We just keep adding 2 each time, and that's going to bring us from one even number to the next. So let's say our first even number. So first, our first even number that we're starting with in this list that we're adding together to get 138 is x. Now we have to use that pattern. The second even number that's going to be in this consecutive list here is going to be x plus 2. So we're just using this pattern here to get from one even number to the next. We're going to have to add 2 each time. So the list I'm imagining, we have 3 consecutive numbers. We have x, and then we have x plus 2. And then the next number, if we do another plus 2, so our third number is going to be x plus 2 plus another 2, which is equal to x plus 4. So we just do 2 plus 2 is 4. So those are the 3 numbers here. And now we're finding the sum. The sum means we have to add those 3 numbers together. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to have x plus 2 plus x plus 4 is equal to 138. And now we just combine like terms. We have x plus x is 3x. And then we have 2 plus 4 is 6. So we have plus 6 is equal to 138. And now to solve for x, we just start by subtracting 6 on both sides. We have minus 6 on both sides, and that's going to give us, we have 6 minus 6 is 0, so we have 3x is equal to 8 minus 6 is 2, and then the 13 just carries down, so we have 132 like this. So now to solve for x, we're going to divide both sides by 3, and we're going to have x equals, and now to close this out, we're just going to do the long division off to the side here. So we have 132 divided by 3. So we say 3 goes into 13 4 times, and 4 times 3 is 12. So we subtract 12, we get 1, we carry down the 2, and now 3 goes into 12 4 times. So if we do 4 times 3, notice we get 12. So this divides evenly. So our x value here is equal to, we have 44. So that tells us the first number is going to be 44. So we have 44 is the first number in our consecutive even list. So we have 44, and then think about it. What is 44 plus 2? The next even number would be 46, and then the third even number would be another 2 forward, would be 48. So the largest of these numbers is going to be 48. But just so that I feel safe, I'm going to go ahead and add these 3 numbers together, and let's hope that we get 138. So we're going to add, we have 48, we have 46, and we have 44. So if we add these 3 numbers together, 8 plus 6 is equal to 14, and then we have 14 plus 4 is equal to 18, so we carry 1 up top. And then 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13, and notice that we get a sum of 138. So this answer is checking out. 48 is the largest of these consecutive even numbers. Question 5, we have this equation here, and we want to know what is the value of y. So for this one, we just have to do the inverse operations to get y by itself. So we're solving for this term here, y. So first, to get rid of this minus 3, let's go ahead and do plus 3 to both sides. So this is the golden rule of algebra. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do the same thing to the other if you want to keep that equal sign. strong, okay? We want to keep this equal sign strong, so we have to do the same thing to both sides of the equation. So minus 3 plus 3 is going to cancel, and we've got 2y is equal to 11 plus 3 is 14. And now to get y by itself, the goal once again is to solve for y. We're going to get rid of that 2 in front, but this 2 is attached by multiplication. So the opposite of multiplying by 2 is to divide by 2. So we divide both sides by 2, and this gives us y is equal to 14 divided by 2 is equal to 7. So y equals 7. Choice C is our answer. Question 6, we have a rectangle has a width of 10 centimeters and a length of 15 centimeters. What is the perimeter of the rectangle? So for this question here, the first thing I would do is draw this out. So we have this rectangle, and for this rectangle here, we're told the width is 10 centimeters and the length is 15 centimeters. So one thing you need to know about rectangles is that the opposite sides are equal in measure. So if this side is 15 centimeters, the one across is also 15 centimeters. And if the width here is 10 centimeters on the right side, on the left side as well, we have 10 centimeters. And now to find the perimeter is equal to the sum of the sides around the figure, okay? And in a rectangle, we have 4 sides, so we're going to be adding these 4 numbers together. There is a formula we could use to find the perimeter of a rectangle, so I'm just going to write this a little bit neater. We have the perimeter of a rectangle is equal to 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. But me personally, I like to draw the shape out, because then you could see that the perimeter, you're just adding up the lengths of all the sides going around the shape like this. So that just highlights the concept more. So now we have the perimeter is equal to, and we're going to have 15, and I'm going to add all the numbers and write the units at the end. So we have 15 plus 10 plus 15 plus 10. So I'm just adding these sides together like this, and this is all being measured in centimeters. So now we have the perimeter is equal to, and if I do 15 plus 10, that's 25. So I have 25 plus another 25, and we're talking about centimeters here. And now I just do 25 plus 25, and that's equal to 50. So the perimeter is going to be equal to 50 centimeters. Now, before we move on, there's one more way we could do this. We could just use the formula. So we could say 2 times the length, and the length is 15 centimeters. And then we have plus 2 times the width. The width is 10 centimeters. So if we work this out here, we're going to have perimeter equals 2 times 15 is 30. So we have 30 centimeters plus 2 times 10 centimeters is going to give us 20 centimeters. And this is going to give us 30 plus 20 is 50 centimeters. So either way, we're getting choice B. Question 7, we're solving for x, and this equation is a little bit tricky because we have this fraction outside. So we're going to use the distributive property. We're going to send this 2/3 all the way through like this. So we're going to do 2/3 first times 3x, and then we have 2/3 times 6. So this is all equal to x minus 2. So for this question, we just have to be strong with fractions. So let's think about how do we do 2/3 times 3. So I'll do that off to the side. When we do 2/3 times 3, a nice thing for multiplying fractions is you could cross cancel. So I just look over here and say 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I could just cross these off because they're matching factors. And this is just equal to 2. So we're going to start off here. We're going to have 2x, and then we have minus. And if I do 2/3 times 6, 2/3 times 6, I'm doing 6 divided by 3 is 2. And then 2 times 2 is equal to 4. So I'm going to have minus 4. And this is equal to, we have x, and then minus 2 like this. So now to solve for x, we're going to go minus x on both sides. And this is going to give us on the left, we have x. After we do 2x minus 1x, and then we have minus 4 is equal to, and then x minus x cancels, and we're left with negative 2 on this side. So now we write the rest over here. We have x minus 4 equals negative 2. And now to get rid of minus 4, we're going to do plus 4 on both sides. And now we work this out. After x gets by itself, because we have negative 4 plus 4 canceling, we have x equals negative 2 plus 4 is equal to positive 2. So that's the value of x here. For a question like this, I recommend that you plug in to check. And if you struggle with the algebra, once again, you can just plug in all the answer choices. So if we plug in here, we're going to have 2/3, and then in parentheses, we have 3 times our solution was x equals 2, and then minus 6, and then I close the parentheses. And this is equal to, and we'll make a little space here, we have x minus 2. So we're going to have 2 minus 2. And now when we work this out, we have 2/3, and then in the parentheses, we have 6 minus 6, because 3 times 2 is 6. And now this is equal to 0. And notice here, 6 minus 6 is also equal to 0. So we're going to have 2/3 times 0 equals 0. And this is a true statement. So choice C is definitely correct. Question 8, we have a shirt originally priced at $40 is on sale for 25% off. And we have, if a customer has to pay 6% sales tax, what is the final price of the shirt? So for this question here, we're going to take 25% off of 40 first. And remember, 25% means 25 out of 100. So for this fraction here, we could reduce this by dividing the top and bottom by 25. And that's going to tell us our new fraction. We have 25 divided by 25 is 1. Over, we have 100 divided by 25 is 4. So if we want to take 25% off of 40, we're going to go ahead and just multiply by 1/4. So we have $40 and we're multiplying by 1/4. And remember, when you multiply a whole number by a fraction, all you have to do is the whole number times the numerator. So we're going to do 40 times 1 is 40, and we're dividing by 4. And now this is how many dollars the discount is going to be. So 40 divided by 4 is 10. So the discount is $10. So with this information, we have to subtract that from the price of the shirt. So we're going to do 40 and we're going to subtract $10. So we have $40 minus $10 is $30. So that's the new price of the shirt before the tax. But now we have to apply the 6% sales tax. So we're going to turn 6% into a decimal. So we have 6% means 6 out of 100. And just know when you have 6 hundredths, this is equal to 0.06. Please don't say 6 over 100 is equal to 0.6. Okay, be very careful here. This is a very dangerous bear trap. And this is a very common mistake people make when they turn something like 6% or a single digit percent into a decimal. Just know 0.6 would be the same thing as 60%. I would have 0.60 like this. That would represent 60%, not 6%. So just be careful when you set it up. So now what we do with this decimal here is we're going to multiply it by 30. So I'm going to do over here, we're going to have 30 times, and then we're multiplying by 0.06. So in a situation like this, the trick that you're going to use is you're going to pretend that you're doing 30 times 6. Okay, so pretend you're doing 30 times 6 and then just pay the decimals back at the end. So I'm going to turn this into, we're going to have, once again, I'm going to turn this into 30 times 6, but then notice that I ignored 2 decimal places. Okay, I went 2 spaces to the right. So now when I do 30 times 6, 6 times 0 is 0, and 6 times 3 is 18. So this, I'm going to write 180 over here, but remember, I ignored 2 decimal places. So I'm going to have to pay them back and send the decimal. Notice this is 180.0. I have to send the decimal 2 places to the left, and that's going to bring it over here like this. So our solution is going to be 1.80, or at least I should say our sales tax is 1.80. But now what we have to do is this represents our tax. We have to add this onto the price of the discounted shirt. So now we're going to do $30 and we're going to add the tax, which is $1.80. So we're going to do plus, and we're adding $1.80. So now we just do 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 8 is 8, and we have 0 plus 1 is 1, and the 3 carries down. So the total price here with the discount and the tax is choice A, $31.80. Now, one cool trick before we move on, you could take the tax of 6%, and as a decimal, that was 0.06, and you could add it to 1. So in my head, I'm doing 1 plus 0.06, and that's equal to 1.06. And what you do with this number here is you could just multiply that by 30 all at once. And the nice thing about this trick is that it's going to add the sales tax onto the price of the shirt all at once, and it's going to give us an answer of $31.80. So notice what happens when I multiply. 0 times 6 is 0, 0 times 0 is 0, and then we have 0 times 1 is 0. I put a placeholder, and then I have 3 times 6 is 18. I carry the 1. 3 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1, and then I have 3 times 1 is 3. And notice here when I add these up, I get 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 8 is 8, I have 0 plus 1 is 1, and then the 3 carries down. And notice I ignored 2 decimal places, so I have to pay 2 decimal places back. So the solution here would be $31.80. So once again, if you add the sales tax to 1 and multiply that number by the total bill, that's going to add the sales tax on for you. Otherwise, you just have to multiply the bill by 6% and then add the tax onto the price of the shirt. But whichever way, either way you do this, you're going to get choice A. That is our solution. Question 9, we have a diagram of a triangle, and we're told that one angle measures 35 degrees, another angle measures 70 degrees, and then we're told the measure of the exterior angle adjacent to the third missing angle is x degrees, and we have to solve for x. So for this question here, we have to have 2 big ideas. And the first big idea is that when you have 3 angles inside of a triangle, the sum of those 3 angles equals 180 degrees. And then the second big idea is when you have a straight line, the sum of the 2 or more angles that make up a straight line also equals 180 degrees. So let me call this missing angle right over here y for a moment. So I'm going to have, when I add this up, I'm going to have y and then plus, and I'll go ahead and put a degree symbol like x has. So I'm going to say y degrees like this. But now I'm just going to add the numbers y plus 35 plus 70. The sum of those three numbers has to equal 180. So that's the first big idea. And now we have 35 plus 70 is 105. So we have y plus 105 is equal to 180. And now to solve for y, I'm just going to subtract 105 on both sides. So we have minus 105 going on both sides. This and this term over here cancel out because they're matching opposites. And now I'm going to borrow here because I can't do 0 minus 5. It's going to go in the negative. So I have to borrow here and make this a 7. I put a 10 here, and now I have 10 minus 5 is 5. I have 7 minus 0 is 7. And then 1 minus 1 is 0, but I'm not going to write it in front. So we have y equals 75. So we'll go ahead and fill that in over here. We have this angle over here is now 75 degrees. So now we're going to use that second big idea to solve for x. So remember, when we have a straight line like this, the two angles that are building this straight line have to make up 180 degrees. So that means x degrees plus 75 degrees is going to equal 180 degrees. So that allows us to say x plus 75 is equal to 180. And now we could solve for x by subtracting 75 on both sides. So now we just have to do the subtraction here. We're going to have x equals, and we're going to have to borrow again. We're going to borrow from the 8, and it's going to make it a 7, and we put a 10 here, and 10 minus 5 is 5. 7 minus 7 is 0, and the 1 carries down. So the value of x is going to be 105. And now if we want to check our work here, what we could do is we write 105 degrees. That's the measure of this angle. And if we do 105 degrees plus 75 degrees, this does in fact work out to 180 degrees. So our angle 105 is definitely good. Question 10, we have the area of a square is 64 square centimeters, and we want to know what is the length of one side of the square. So for this question, let's imagine here we have this square, and the area refers to the space on the inside. So the area of this square is 64 square centimeters, which we could write like this, 64, and then we have centimeters to the second. That's how we write square centimeters. And the length of the sides we're going to call s. So remember, a square, all the sides are equal in length. So when we want to find the area of a square, we're going to do s squared like this. If this situation involved a rectangle, just know with a rectangle, they're going to give you a length and a width, and the area of a rectangle is equal to length times width. But in this situation here, we have a square. So in a sense, we're doing length times width, but we have s times s is equal to s squared. So the area itself is equal to 64 square centimeters, but I'm going to leave the units out for now. 64 equals s squared. So think about it. What number times itself is equal to 64? And that number is going to be 8. So 8 centimeters is going to represent the length of the side of this square. And if we wanted to actually do the algebra here, we just have to take the square root of both sides. And this tells us the side length is equal to the square root of 64, which is equal to 8. And then I would just tack on the units here. The side length is 8 centimeters. So either way, we're going to get choice C. Question 11, we have Jasmine bought 2 dozen donuts for $14, and we want to know how much does 1 donut cost. So the first thing we have to know here is that 1 dozen is equal to 12. So 2 dozen would be 2 times 12 donuts. And that tells us that Jasmine bought 24 donuts. So now to find out how much does 1 donut cost, we have to be mindful that Jasmine's total bill was $14. So we're going to take $14, and now we're going to divide it by 24 donuts. And this is going to tell us how much 1 donut cost. So we're dividing by 24 donuts. So now off to the side here, we'll do the long division. We have 14, and we're dividing by 24. So now 24 goes into 14 0 times because 24 is greater than 14. So now I could put a decimal here and a decimal here, and I could start adding zeros. Now 24 will go into 140 5 times. And I know it's 5 because a little trick I do when I multiply something by 5, well, just know 24 times 5 is 120. But if I want to do a times 5 trick in my head, what I do is I do times 10 and then I divide by 2. So 24 times 5, that's the same thing as doing 24 times 10 and then dividing it by 2 or multiplying by a half. So 24 times 10 is 240. I just add a 0 at the end. And if I take half of 240, I get 120. So that's how I knew it was going to be 5. So now I subtract that product. I do minus 120, and now 140 minus 120 is 20. And I could add in another 0 here because these zeros at the end of the decimal don't add any value to the number. And I could bring this down and think about how many times does 24 go into 200. So now I'm going to look at the answer choices here. And it's looking like 24 goes into 200, definitely more than 0 times. So choice C is already looking good, but let's see, what is 24 times 8? So if I do that off to the side, so let's say I do that over here, and then I'll erase it later. 24 times 8, if I work this out, I have 4 and 8. If I multiply those, I get 32, and I carry the 3, and then 8 times 2 is 16, plus 3 is 19. So I get 192. So that's pretty close to 200. If I went another 24, that would definitely go over. So I'm going to put an 8 here like this, and then when we multiply, we get minus 192, and we're going to have a leftover here of 8, because if I did 192 plus 8, that gives us 200. And then if I brought another 0 down like this, I could think about how many times does 24 go into 80, and I would be able to go 3 times. If I multiply 3 times 24, 24 times 3, I'll write that over here, this time around is going to work out to, after I do the multiplication, we're going to have 72. So this would bring us pretty close, but notice that 3 is not going to allow us to round up. We would round down to 58 cents. So that's how I know for sure choice C is our answer. Question 12, we have a rectangle has a perimeter of 24 centimeters and a length of 7 centimeters, and we want to know what is its width. So for this question, let's draw out a rectangle, and we'll go ahead and say the length is the horizontal side over here. It doesn't matter which one we label as the length, but let's just go ahead and say this side here is the length. So we're going to say 7 centimeters over here, and we know that in a rectangle, opposite sides are equal in measure. So I could say this side over here is also 7 centimeters, and we want to know what is the width. So I'm going to call this W on both sides, because remember, opposite sides are equal in measure when we have a rectangle. So the perimeter they told us is 24 centimeters, but remember, the perimeter is the distance all around the shape if we take the sum of all the sides of this figure. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to add up all the sides, and I'm going to leave the units out until the end. So I'm going to do first, I'll do 7 plus 7, and then I'll do W plus W. So that's the 4 sides we're adding together, and we're going to set this equal to 24. So now we just combine like terms. 7 plus 7 is 14, and then we have W plus W is 2W, and this is equal to 24. So now to solve for W, let's do the opposite operations. We're going to do minus 14 on both sides, and then we're going to have on this side, 14 minus 14 cancels, and on this side here, we're going to have 4 minus 4 is 0, 2 minus 1 is 1, and this is equal to, we have 2W. So now to solve for the width, just divide both sides by 2. And now we're going to have W is equal to 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the width here is going to be 5 centimeters, and this is going to match up with choice D. Question 13, which of the following expressions is equivalent to 2 times, and we have in parentheses 3x minus 4. So for this question, we just have to use the distributive property. So we're going to do 2 times 3x, and then we have minus 2 times 4 over here like this. So now we just work this out. We're going to have 2 times 3x is 6x, and we have minus 2 times 4 is 8. And now we just scan the answer choices, and this is going to match up with choice A. Question 14, we have Alice spent 30% of her money on a book, and then 50% of the remaining money on a shirt. And then we have, if she has $42 left, how much money did she have at the beginning? So for a question like this, what I would do is go piece by piece. Alice starts out with 100% of her money, but then she buys a book, and when she buys the book, that takes away 30% of her money. So we're going to do 100% minus 30. And this once again represents when Alice bought the book, she's losing 30% of her money. So now we do 100% minus 30%. We're just doing 100 minus 30 is 70. So we have 70% here. So that represents how much money Alice has remaining. And now think about it. From here, Alice spends 50% of the remaining money on a shirt. So at this stage here, she's going to take half of 70%, okay? Because remember, 50% is the same thing as 50 out of 100, and 50 out of 100, if we divide the top and bottom by 50, is equal to a half. So what we could do here is to account for the shirt, we could take 70% and divide it by 2, because once again, she spends 50% of the remaining money on a shirt, and 70% is what remains, so that's what we're dividing by 2. So this tells us once again, and this is accounting for the shirt, that after Alice buys the shirt, she has 35% of her original amount of money remaining. So now let's set up an equation. So now we could say 35% of Alice's original amount of money, we'll call that X, is equal to, and then $42. So now there's a few ways we could solve this, but one thing we could do is turn 35% into a fraction. So here we're going to say 35 out of 100 times X is equal to, and then we have 42. So now the algebra we could do here is we could just multiply both sides by the reciprocal of 35 over 100. So let's just give ourselves a little bit of space here so we can multiply by that reciprocal. So I'm just going to move this over. And now what we're going to do is we're going to multiply both sides by 100 over 35. Okay, so times 100 over 35 on both sides. And notice on the left side, we're going to have 100 over 100 cancel, and we're going to have 35 over 35 cancel. And this tells us that x is equal to, so first we're doing 42 times 100, and that's just going to make 4200. Remember, when you multiply by a number like 100, you just add 2 zeros to the end of your whole number, and that gives us 4,200, and that we're dividing by 35. So now we'll just go ahead and do the long division. We have 4,200, and we're dividing by 35. So 35 goes into 42 once, and if we subtract 35, we're going to have a remainder here of 7. And now we bring down the 0, and 35 goes into 70 2 times. And I have 2 times 35 is going to give us 70, so minus 70. And then we bring down this 0. We bring down the last 0 here, and 35 goes into 0 times, and 0 times 35 is 0. So I have no remainder here after I do all this. So that tells us once we simplify all of this, we're going to have x is equal to 120. And this tells us that Alice starts out with $120. Now, before we move on, we could check our answer here. We're going to take 120 and let's see what is 70% of 120. So if we multiply this by 70%, and just know 70% is 70 out of 100, and this reduces to 7 over 10. So I can multiply by 7 over 10. And in this case here, I could cross off the trailing zeros, and I'm going to have 12 times 7 is 84. So this tells us that after Alice bought the book, she has $84 left, and then she spends 50% of this money. So we're going to take 50% of 84, or do 84 divided by 2, and notice that gives us the remaining amount here of 42. So this solution here is definitely correct. Question 15, we have the sum of two numbers is 35. So I'm going to call the two numbers x and y, and sum means add. So we're going to have x plus y is equal to 35, and then we have their difference is equal to 7. So we're going to say x minus y, because in math, difference means subtract. And they're telling us the difference is 7. And we want to know what is the value, or what is the larger number. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to solve this system by elimination. And notice that we have y and we have minus y. So this system we could just add together here. And we're going to have x plus x is 2x. And then we have y plus minus y. And y plus minus y is going to cancel out. So we have 2x is equal to, and then on the right side, we have 35 plus 7 is 42. So now to solve for x, just divide both sides by 2. And this is going to give us, we're going to have x is equal to 42 divided by 2. I do 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then I do 2 divided by 2 is 1. So x is equal to 21. Now, one thing I would do to be safe here is I would find what is the value of y. So we have x plus y was equal to 35. And remember, x was equal to 21. So I have 21 plus y is equal to 35. And now what I could do is I'm going to subtract 21 on both sides, and that's going to tell us the value of y. So we have y is equal to 5 minus 1 is 4, 3 minus 2 is 1, so y would be equal to 14. So the larger number of the two is going to be 21. So choice B is our answer. Question 16, we have this equation here, and we want to know what is the value of x. So we're starting off with 5x is equal to 1/3, and to solve for x, we have 5 times x, so we're going to divide both sides by 5. And notice that on the left side, 5 over 5 cancels, but on the right side, we have 1/3 divided by 5. So this could be a little tricky to deal with, but what I would do is call this 5 over 1, because 5 over 1 is still equal to 5. So I'm not really changing anything here. And now we're going to divide these two fractions, and there's a nice technique. It's called keep, change, flip. And what you do is you keep the fraction on top, so we're going to keep 1/3, and then we're going to change the operation from division to multiplication. So we have times, and then we're going to flip the fraction on bottom. And when we flip it, we're finding the reciprocal. So we're going to flip this to 1 over 5. And now when you multiply fractions, multiply the numerators. You're going to do 1 times 1 is 1 over 3 times 5 is 15. So x is equal to 1 over 15. Choice A is our answer. Question 17, we have a circle has a radius of 4 centimeters, and we want to know what is its area. So the area of a circle, you have to know, is pi times r squared. And they're telling us to use pi equals 3.14. So to find the area, we're just going to plug in. We have area equals pi times, and then we have the radius of the circle is equal to 4 centimeters. So I'm going to plug this in without the units, and then we'll worry about the units at the end. So I'm going to have pi times, and then we have 4 squared. So now we're going to follow order of operations here. So remember order of operations, we have PEMDAS, and we have a nice mnemonic is please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, but this tells us to do parentheses exponents before we multiply. So we're going to do 4 to the second power, which is 4 times 4, and that's equal to 16. So we're going to have 16 times pi is 16 pi. So now we're going to multiply these two together. Remember, they told us to use pi equals 3.14. So I'm going to do 3.14 for pi times 16 like this. So I have times 16, and now I just do the multiplication. 6 times 4 is 24. I carry the 2, and then I have 6 times 1 is 6, plus 2 is 8, and then I have 6 times 3 is 18. And now I put a placeholder. I go to the next row. 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times 3 is 3. And now just add everything up here. We're going to have 4 plus 0 is 4. 8 plus 4 is 12. We carry the 1. And then 1 plus 8 plus 1 is 10. And we carry another 1. And then 1 plus 1 plus 3 is 50. But remember, I did 314 times 16. I ignored 2 decimal places. So I have to pay 2 decimal places back. And 50.24 is going to be our area in square centimeters. And this is going to match up with choice B. Question 18, we have in a class of 40 students, 60% passed the math exam. How many students failed the math exam? So for this one here, if 60% passed, that means that 40% failed, because remember, in the class, there's 100% of the students. So let's think about this. If we had 60% plus 40%, that's going to give us the entire class, which is 100%, okay? So that's a big idea, is finding the missing percent that makes 100. So what we're doing is we want to know how many students failed the exam. So we're going to find 40% of 40. So let's go ahead and do that. 40% is equal to, and we could call this 40 over 100 like this. And this simplifies. We have the zeros crossing off at the end, and this is equal to 4 over 10. And if we want to reduce this even more, we could divide the top and bottom by 2. And this is going to give us 2 over 5. So what we're really going to do here is we're going to take 40 and we're going to multiply by 2/5. So now we multiply this out, and this is going to give us, I could call this 40 over 1. We're going to have 40 times 2 up top, and we're going to have 1 times 5 on bottom. And now a nice way to simplify fractions, we can do 40 times 2 is 80 and then divide by 5. But a nice trick is to do 40 divided by 5 first, and 40 divided by 5 is 8, and then 8 times 2 is equal to 16. So that tells us that 16 students failed the exam. Now, one thing to be careful of, some students might look at this question and say, okay, I'm going to find 60% of 40, and just know 60% is equal to 60 out of 100. And this is equal to 6 over 10. And if we reduce 6 over 10, dividing the top and bottom by 2, this is going to be equal to 3/5. So if we were to find 3/5 of 40, notice when we do 40 times 3 over 5 instead, 40 divided by 5 is still equal to 8, and we have 8 times 3 is equal to 24, and choice B is a very dangerous bear trap, okay? That would be correct if they want to know how many students passed the exam, not how many students failed. So just make sure that you're using the correct percent, and in this case, we have to go with the 40% because that represents the percent of students that failed. Question 19, we have Sarah goes shopping and buys 3 shirts, each priced at $25, and 2 pairs of pants at $40 each. And then she also picks up a hat for $15. And then after calculating the total, she uses a coupon that gives her a $20 discount on her entire purchase. And we want to know how much does she pay in the end. So for this question, we have shirts, we have pants, and we have a hat. So the shirts, let's see how much she spends. She spends $25 for each shirt, and she buys 3 of them. So $25 times 3, that would give us $75 for how much Sarah spends on shirts. And then for pants, remember, Sarah spends $40 on a pair of pants. So she buys 2 pairs of pants. So we're going to do $40 times 2, and that's going to give us $80. And then next up here, we have the hat. The hat cost $15. So the hat is $15. And now we want to know how much does she spend at the end. So when we add these up here, let's go ahead and add. We're going to add 75, 80, and 15. So we'll do that over here. So we'll have 80, 75, and 15. So we add these up. We have 0 plus 5 plus 5 is 10. We carry the 1. And then we have 1 plus 8 is 9. But notice then I have 9 and 1. That makes 10. And then I have 10 plus 7 is 17. So Sarah spends $170. But no, be very, very careful. Choice C is a very dangerous bear trap. You have to remember that Sarah gets a $20 discount on her entire purchase. So a discount means we're going to subtract $20 from her total bill. And that tells us we have 0 minus 0 is 0. 7 minus 2 is 5, and the 1 carries down. That Sarah spends $150 at the end. So choice B is our answer. Question 20, we have a car travels 280 miles in 4 hours, and we want to know what is its average speed. So the average speed is measured in miles per hour. So that means we're going to do 280 miles, and then we're going to divide it by hours. Because once again, when we want to find average speed, we do the distance traveled in the time that it takes to travel that distance. So we're going to do 280 miles divided by 4 hours. So now off to the side, we'll do the long division. 280 divided by 4, I have 4 going into 28 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28, so I subtract 28, and this subtracts nicely. It gives us a 0. So now we carry down the 0 here like this, and 4 goes into 0 0 times. And after I do 0 times 4 is 0, this tells us we have no remainder. This divides very nicely. So this divides, we have 280 over 4 dividing to make 70, and then the units here, miles per hour, we could abbreviate with mph, and this is going to match up with choice C. Question 21, we have a cylindrical tank has a height of 5 meters and a radius of 2 meters, and we want to know how many liters of water can it hold, and we're going to use pi equals 3.14, and note that 1 cubic meter equals 1,000 liters. So for this question here, we have to know that a cylindrical tank means it's in the shape of a cylinder. So we have this nice cylinder here, and just know that a cylinder, we have to know how to find the volume of a cylinder here. So the volume of a cylinder is equal to pi r squared times h, where h represents the height and r represents the radius. So they told us that the height of this tank is 5 meters. So that's the height of this cylindrical tank. And then the radius, that's the distance from the center here all the way to like one part of the outside, is 2 meters. So to find the amount of water that this thing could hold, first we have to find the volume, because we're told that 1 cubic meter equals 1,000 liters. So we have to find out how many cubic meters of volume does this cylindrical tank have. So let's go ahead and plug in. We're going to have volume equals pi times, and I'll leave the units out to the very end. So we have the radius is 2, so we have 2 squared times the height is equal to 5. So now we work this out, and we're going to do order of operations. We do parentheses exponents first. So 2 to the second power is 2 times 2, and that's 4. So I get pi times 4 times 5. And now I could do 4 times 5 is 20. So I get 20 pi like this. And now they told us to use pi equals 3.14. So off to the side here, I'm going to do 3.14 and multiply by 20. So first I'm going to pretend I'm doing 314 times 20. So I do 0 times 4 is 0, 0 times 1, 0 times 3, I put a placeholder, and now I have 2 times 4 is 8, 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 times 3 is 6. And now we add these up. We have 0 plus 0, 0 plus 8, 0 plus 2, and then the 6 carries down. But now I'm going to pay the 2 decimal places back, and this is going to give us, let's just make that, we'll fix that mark there. We're going to move the decimal 2 spaces. This is going to work out. We're going to say the volume is 62.8. Now remember, the volume here is going to be measured in cubic meters, okay? Because remember, volume is 3 dimensions, so that's going to tell us we're going to take the meters and raise it to the 3rd power. If we're talking about distance, then we just use meters to the 1st power, and if we're talking about area, we would be talking about square meters, but for volume, it's going to be cubic meters. And they told us here that 1 cubic meter is equal to 1,000 liters. So what we're going to do with this information is we're going to say the amount of water that it could hold. So the amount of water, so we're going to say here, and I'll just call this the amounts of water is going to be equal to, and we're going to take this volume here, the 62.8, and the cubic meter, we're going to replace with 1,000 liters. So we're going to multiply by 1,000 liters like this. And now we just have to do 62.8 times 1,000. And the trick here, when you multiply by 1,000, what you're going to do is you're going to move the decimal 3 spaces to the right, because notice I have 3 zeros trailing here. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and this is going to make our answer here. We have 62,800 liters. So the solution is going to be 62,800 liters, and this is going to match up with choice D. Question 22, we have the product of a number and itself is 144, and we want to know what is the number. So the number for now we're going to call x. And think about this, the product of the number x and itself, that would be x times x. And then in math, the word is means equals. So this allows us to say that x times x equals 144. So now we're solving this equation for x. And then we have x times x is x squared, and x squared is equal to 144. So now to solve for x, we're going to take the square root of both sides. And notice that all of the answer choices are positive. So that means when we say x equals, all we have to worry about is the positive solution here. Because technically when we do the square root of x squared, we should say plus or minus x when we're solving quadratic equations. But in this situation here, once again, all the answers are positive. So we're just going to go with the plus x answer here. So now we have the square root of 144 is equal to 12. And I know this to be true because 12 times 12 is equal to 144. So that's how we know here that choice B is going to be our answer. Now, just to explore this concept a little bit more before we move on, let's say I had a situation like x squared is equal to 9, and the question said to solve for all values x. Well, in a situation like this, once again, I could take the square root of both sides, and this would give us x equals, and the square root of 9, in this case, I'd have to say is plus or minus 3, because once again, the square root of x squared when you're solving quadratic equations, you have to say plus or minus. And the reason behind this, why do we have two answers of 3 and negative 3? Well, think about what we started with. I'll write this over here. I had x squared equals 9. So if I check my answers, 3 squared is definitely equal to 9. And when I plug in negative 3 for x, I would have negative 3 in parentheses squared is equal to 9. And negative 3 times negative 3 is also 9, giving us 9 equals 9. So that's how in this situation here, both answers check out. So once again, if I was solving a quadratic equation, I have to be extra careful. But in this question here, all the answer choices were positive. Question 23, we have a square garden has an area of 49 square meters, and we want to know what is the diagonal of the garden. So for this question, let's go ahead and write out this formula. The area of a square is equal to s squared, where s represents the length of the side of the square. So if the area is 49 square meters, and I'll leave the units out for this question, and we'll just worry about the numbers and put the units in at the end. So we have area equals 49, and that's going to be equal to s squared. So to find the length of the side of the square, we're going to take the square root of both sides. And this tells us the side length of the square is equal to 7 meters. So now I'm going to go ahead and draw out the square. So we have this square here, and the length of the sides are 7 units long like this, or 7 meters long. So now we want to know what is the length of the diagonal. So just know in a square, all the angles at the corners are right angles. So if I want to find the length of this diagonal here, notice that I have a right triangle. And if I want to find the missing side, for now I'll call it C, I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem. And remember, for the Pythagorean theorem, when you have a right triangle and the sides are, let's say, A, B, C, the formula that connects these three sides is a squared plus b squared. And we can say this is equal to c squared. So I'm going to say in this case here, let's say a is equal to 7. We'll say b is equal to 7, and then c is what we're solving for. So if I plug into that formula, I'm going to have 7 squared plus 7 squared, and this is equal to c squared. So now we have 7 squared is 49 plus 49, and this is equal to c squared. And now 49 plus 49 is 98, and 98 is equal to c squared. But notice here that when I solve for c, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Square root of 98 is not an answer choice, and the reason behind this is we have to simplify this square root. So the way we're going to simplify this is we have to think of perfect square factors of 98. And notice we just did 49 plus 49, and know that 49 plus 49 is repeated addition. We could say this is 49 times 2. So 98 I could break down as 49 times 2. So this radical I'm going to split up to square root of 49 times the square root of 2. And then we have the square root of 49 is 7, and the square root of 2 does not simplify. So the length of the diagonal is going to be 7 square root of 2. And now I'll go ahead and tack on the units here and say that this is 7 meters, and the diagonal over here is 7 square root of 2 meters long. So this is going to match up with choice B. Question 24, we have these two equations here, and we want to know what is the value of x. So we have a system of equations here. So I'm going to write these up, stacking them vertically. So we have x plus y equals 5, and we have x minus y is equal to 1. So in this situation here, I would add these equations together because I have y and negative y. So when I add these together, I have matching opposites. The matching opposites are just going to cancel. And then we have x plus x is 2x, and we have 5 plus 1 is equal to 6. So now we divide both sides by 2. And this is going to tell us that x is equal to 3, and this is going to match up with choice C. Now, if you want to be 100% safe here, what you could do is you could plug into one of the equations here to solve for y. So when I have x plus y equals 5, I could say 3 plus y is equal to 5. And solving for y, I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. This tells us that y is equal to 2. So our solution to the system of equations here is going to be the point 3, 2, where 3 is our x and 2 is our y value. And now if I want to be 100% safe, what I'll do is I'll plug these x and y values into the second equation, and I'm going to have x minus y equals 1. So if I plug in here, I have 3 minus 2 is equal to 1, which gives us 1 equals 1. So this tells us here that this point satisfies both equations. So that's how we know x equals 3 is definitely correct. And now question 25, our last question, we have use the diagram below of parallel lines L and M cut by transversal N to find the value of X. So for this question, we have to know that when we have parallel lines, in this case, L and M are parallel, and the parallel lines are cut by a transversal, the corresponding angles formed are congruent. So that means that any angles that are in the same location in this section here and this section here are going to be equal in measure. So this 70-degree angle over here in the top right spot is going to be equal to this angle over here in the top right spot. So that means I can label this angle over here as 70 degrees. And now notice what we have. We have X and this 70-degree angle over here. X degrees and 70 degrees are forming a straight line. And remember what I said before, when you have a straight line, you have 180 degrees of angle measure. So that allows us to say that X plus 70 is going to be equal to 180. And now to solve for X, I just subtract 70 on both sides. And this is going to give us the value of X. X is equal to, we do the subtraction, we get 110. So choice B is our solution.